Good morning, everyone. Happy humid times to everyone here in Connecticut. My name is Amherst Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut League of History Organizations, and I want to welcome you and thank you for being here today for our info session and Q&A about Connecticut Collections, which is a project of the Connecticut League of History Organizations. We have with us here today myself, who will be talking a little bit, but also our Connecticut Collections Project Coordinator, Diane Lee. And also Nick Foster, who's Associate Curator at the Wilton Historical Society, who's a CLHO board member and also a user of the system. So we have a lot of expertise here at the table and are looking forward to sharing a little bit more with you about this collections management system and public portal option for managing your resources and to taking your questions later on today. If you have any questions as we go, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And we'll be sure to queue those up for after we've finished speaking. We're hoping to take no more than 30 minutes with a brief presentation and then open things up to a broader Q&A to really dig into the questions that you have about Connecticut Collections. Thanks for being here. So what we're going to do today is give you a little overview of Connecticut Collections, the project, what it is, what it does. And some potential advantages of Connecticut Collections, why you might want to participate in this project of CLHO. We're going to talk a little bit about pricing, of course. Everyone wants to know how much is this going to cost, and think a little bit about how it compares to some other systems that you may be familiar with, and then go over the next steps if you're interested in joining Connecticut Collections, this Archives Collaborative. We'll also leave plenty of time at the end for your questions. So first off, what is Connecticut Collections? This is a collaborative project of CLHO, and it has sort of three components. The first and most important part, which is really the center of the system, is a robust collections management system that allows you to manage the materials in your museum and archival collections together in one place. It also includes an online public portal that allows you, if you so choose, to share parts of, some of, all of, none of your collections items with the public through a searchable, keyword searchable online public portal, alongside the collections of other Connecticut Collections members, other Connecticut collecting institutions around the state. And it also involves a digital preservation component for your collection items through the Connecticut Digital Archive. So those are kind of the three main aspects of Connecticut Collections. We have about 26 members around the state at present. This is a project that's been around for a little over 5 years at this point. We started with sort of a pilot group and have been steadily adding users each year. As you probably know, we have a sort of annual sort of intake. We have an application that goes out. You've probably seen my emails about that. But as you can see from this list here, our member institutions who are a part of Connecticut Collections really run the gamut, from small town historical societies to larger museums. We also include some independent school special collections and archives. So we have library collections in there, archival collections, manuscript collections, art collections, as well as history collections, statewide organizations like the Connecticut DAR. It really runs the gamut, and we really have a statewide reach. And we're growing every year. For the past several years, we've added about 5 organizations a year and are hoping to increase that over the years ahead. I want to hand things over to Diane for a moment, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about what a collections management system really is and why you might want one if you don't have one already. Diane?
Hi, everybody. So along with being the project coordinator on this, I'm also the collections manager down at the Fairfield Museum in Fairfield along the shore, and have been the collections manager at Connecticut Historical Society previous to this. Most people start thinking about wanting to manage their collection and figure out what they have. Pretty much everybody in the past has been working on that picture down at the bottom left with the card catalogs, and it's much easier and to find things and track things when you start moving over to the computer and figuring out an easier way to search through your collections rather than rely on your memory. and everybody else in the institution's memory to figure out what you have. When people start looking, or you start thinking about how to track and catalog your collections, there's a lot of options available. Just a plain old spreadsheet, an Excel document or something like that's perfectly fine. Fairfield's old system was actually on FileMaker, was customized to do it, not an ideal thing, but it worked. Past Perfect is one of the more commonly known systems. We'll talk about system versus a database in a second. And then there's things like TMS, like the museum system, which is like Cadillac version of a lot of this kind of thing. And there's a ton more that most people have not even heard of. They kind of come out of the woodwork, and you're like, I've been doing this for 15 years and I've never heard of this before. You can go to the next, Amos. Thank you. So what's the difference between like a database and a collections management system? The database is just pretty much like an Excel spreadsheet. Collection of data, it's stored in rows and columns, and relies on you to sort and relate things together. You're searching on one column for toys, or a certain person's name or something like that, and does not link to any outside data or have any authority kind of fields in it. A collections management system is a collection of data, but it's relational database data. So there's big pieces of it that are kind of stored separately, but they all relate to each other. So it relates and manages the data for you, and also enables you to search, organize, and control various aspects of the collection in an easier to find fashion. So behind the scenes, if you say this widget is owned by John Smith, the widget has a record and John Smith has a record, and they've connected those two. So you don't have to search for those independently. You can search for the widget and then go, oh, John Smith owned this. I wonder what else he owned, and links back to him as well. So it's more elaborate, but more easy to kind of bring all the information about your systems in your collection together. What is the main thing about this kind of collections management system that we're talking about? This is cloud and web-based. It doesn't live on one particular computer in your institution. It's built on an open source software, which we're going to talk more about in a little bit. And it's customized to what our needs were. Because of the open source and the easily being able to do it, it's not a proprietary system where you have to go through a big company and they have to make changes. We built this with the idea in mind of what our members, our CLHO members, would need. The sharing the collections online, that's a component of the system, and you can choose what to make public. There's no, you don't have to make anything public. For instance, a lot of our schools, they don't want any of their stuff out to the World Wide Web, but they want it public, or they want to be able to use it within their school, but not public. And it's nice to be able to bring together, if you do decide to make it public, to bring your stuff together with some other Connecticut institutions, because it's really kind of, as we grow more and more and get more people on there, it's really interesting to see what types of collections we all have together. The discoverability part, we're going to talk about a little bit more with the CTDA and the digital preservation. And we're also going to continue to talk a little bit more about the affordable pricing aspect of this, because it's not a proprietary software. So there's no big like company huge price. Nothing's free. And we'll talk about that. But we tried to make it as affordable for people as we can. So this is more about the system architecture. Our platform is called Collective Access. And as I said, it's an open source system, which just basically means that any of the computer language and everything behind it is available for anybody out on the web to use, and to have the back end of the software available and be able to customize it the way they need it. And also the good part is being the cloud-based aspect of it. And there's links to all these as well. Like look in the bottom of the slides when you see it, there's links to more information about a lot of these. So if you want to go onto the Collective Access site and find out more about it, you can. Because it's cloud-based and web-based, you can access it from anywhere with an internet connection. Back in the day, I was very leery of cloud-based stuff. I'm like, I want my server in my building. I want my computer. I want to have control. This web thing's a little sketchy. But honestly, the technology has advanced so much with cloud and backups and sharing and all that, that I love cloud-based software. I loved it particularly in the last year with COVID restrictions. And it's now sadly a selling point in the kind of, reason for getting this kind of a system is I worked from home. We got my museum closed down for a short amount of time, as short as we could do it. But even though we were limiting people coming back, I could do anything that I needed on the database from my house. I didn't have to worry about being in the building or getting into the building. So it's also not dependent on upgrading any physical equipment. If you have an old computer, even if it's got, as long as it's got a browser on it and it's still plugging along, that's fine. If you got the newest, fanciest, greatest computer, that's fine too. There's no requirements. You just need a web browser to be able to access it. There's also no, we kind of said a lot of this in the last one, there's no big purchase support price for this because of the not being proprietary and not being like a company controlling everything and they're the only one that has access to it. And our tech team is actually the company that designed this. So they pretty much know this better than anything. So for like normal everyday questions, you don't have to call like a faraway tech line and wait in the queue. You can just email me and I can answer like easy everyday questions. And then if it's part of a bigger issue, I talk to our tech guy who's just at the other end of my email and we can fix it super easily. There's no having to go through, the whole entire company of things. And yeah. I'm good at Amherst, and she was going to talk about the designed, or Amherst or Nick, I don't remember.
I think Nick is going to talk a little bit.
We decided
this
10 minutes ago, and I don't remember.
Well, I mean, I can just say a few things here, which is that, one of the things that, Diane's been talking about is the way that we customize this system. And with our initial group of pilot institutions, basically what they did is they looked at collective access and what it could do and decided amongst themselves, this was sort of a diverse set of, small to mid-sized institutions, what are the sorts of fields that they would use? What is the sort of interface that would be most useful to them? Thinking about people using this who perhaps are collections professionals, but also thinking about people using this who don't have professional collections training. Perhaps I'm sure that many of you utilize a pool of volunteers to help you manage your collections, to catalog things, to input things into whatever system you might be using. And I think Nick's going to talk a little bit more now about how they use this at Wilton and how it's worked out from them.
Yeah, so thank you, Amherst. So we switched over in 2017. We were part of sort of the second class of Connecticut Collections. And I have to say that it was, our volunteers were a little nervous at first. They had been, I imagine a lot of your museums, we have volunteers that have been here for about 25 years, have been using FileMaker Pro for that long. And we're, accustomed to a certain system. So switching over to something like this was a little scary, but pretty quickly we realized that it was sort of the perfect thing for us. As Diane said, being able to have somebody right away to answer questions, it makes training incredibly easy. If you come across something and you're not sure what it is, you don't have to go to some FAQ on, Past Perfect's website or watch some YouTube video that doesn't quite answer your question. It's just an email away. It was very easy to say, oh, hey, my volunteer ran across this issue. It's not quite saving right. What's going on? And within a day, we got it resolved, which makes training sort of apprehensive volunteers a lot easier because then they're not, waiting a week to try to figure out what's wrong and have somebody can work right with them over the phone or via email. And it makes life so much easier when you need to tweak something. And as we said, we also catered the system to what your users need. We definitely listen to feedback. There's definitely been times where I've reached out to Diane and said, hey, we noticed that we've been cataloging something this way. We'd love for this field to show up this way, or we want our exhibits to be able to be uploaded this way and that. And we definitely pay attention to that. There's definitely been tweaks. This as an open source software, we can kind of keep tweaking it as needed. I know we've been looking at sort of how people handle archives collections on here. So it's been really helpful for us because every time that we have sort of a change in the way our system works, we can just reach out and say, oh, hey, we're thinking about doing this with our collection. How would we go about doing that? And with a few days, we can handle it. We've actually done, it's been so helpful for us that we've actually sort of completely revolutionized how we handle our collections, our intake procedures and our forms and everything, so that it matches up with this. So that way everything flows really smoothly. So I have to say, within about 6 months, we were up and rolling even faster than we had been when we were using FileMaker Pro. So that sort of interaction and that personal interaction has been huge for us. And we're hoping to keep that relationship going, so that if you guys have questions, the training is quick and easy.
Thanks, Nick. Oh, whoa. What happened to my screen share? Let's get back there. Apologies. Diane, I think you were going to talk a little bit more about some of the capabilities of the system here.
Dan, you're on mute.
I know, I just realized as you're looking, as everyone's staring. I think Nick was going to talk about this part, or you want me to go with this part?
I can keep rolling.
Keep going.
So, I mean, the thing that really helped us also is that, our collection dates back to the early 1960s, and we have all sorts of donors and information, and it wasn't always easy in FileMaker Pro, especially if you weren't really great in your vocabulary, to figure out who had donated what. And you can imagine, over 60 years of volunteers, everybody cataloged things a little bit differently. So if I was looking for, Mrs. Smith, it didn't always appear as Mrs. Smith. Sometimes it would be Jane Smith, sometimes it would be Mrs. Jane Smith. And I'm sure, as all of our collections people know, that is a very common problem across all collections databases. The great thing about collective access is, as Diane said earlier, it's a connected collections management database. So, we had to do some cleanup on our end, but it made it very easy for, when you look at this system, to say, I want to see everything Mrs. Jane Smith donated. You simply click on her name or search her name, and everything is interconnected. And with 3 clicks, you can see everything you need to. And we tried to make it as connective as possible. So things like locations, you can click on one location and see everything in it, and see how all these locations are related. So if you have one shelf, you can see all the boxes in it, and then you can see everything in those boxes. If you're like us and have an offsite archive space, you can see what's in those 2 spaces. And as a cloud-based system, if I'm offsite, I can easily just on my phone access it, which is super helpful. Even if I was at another museum last night and they were asking me about a loan, again, could bring up our database on my phone. I didn't have to say, oh, I'll get back to you tomorrow. It was right then and there. So it'll look daunting the first time you see it, but I have to say, within a very short time, and once you kind of get the language down of how everything is connected, it makes life so much easier. And what seems like a ton of bells and whistles is actually just making everything a lot easier to use. And you can do pretty significant reporting on here as well. You can see exactly how many objects and collections and places that you have things right then and there. You can change your home page, your sort of home screen, to show all sorts of different data. So you can sort of make this as complicated or as easy as you want it to be, which again is sort of that customization aspect of the database.
And we usually talk more about object-y things just because I'm more object-based. Nick kind of is too, I think. But there is the capability of, and one of the bigger components of this, one of the equal components to this is archives and manuscripts. So there's a whole section with archives and manuscripts module to this whole thing that you can put in and describe records with, if you have your whole collection, you have boxes of things and folders within boxes, and you can go through and catalog those. So you know what you have in your boxes and your collections and that kind of thing as well. That also interconnects with, so, if Mrs. Smith has a whole box of stuff, she walked in and gave you everything from her wedding, from all of the, paper things that were created, her dress, the photographs, everything. All of this can be interconnected in this and connected to her. So you won't just have to go to the museum and find out that the museum has her dress. You'll also know at the same time that the library, part of the collection has her diary or things like that. So it's another benefit to that. And it's very much the archives and manuscripts section is very much based on library organization of finding aids and that kind of thing. So if anybody's done the traveling archivist program, it very much works well with that and fits into that mode of organizing things.
Great, thanks, folks. And this brings us to another thing about, we mentioned we have this public portal, which you can take a look at ctcollections.org, which is where you can sort of browse and search the publicly available components of our users' collections. Not all of our users have their stuff public, as Diane mentioned, but for those that do, you can get a little sense of how this functions. We think it's a pretty nice interface. I also want to note some, as we said, we're constantly making improvements to the system based on, feedback we get from our users and needs that we know are out there in the community, especially among sort of smaller and mid-sized institutions. And, Diane was just talking about the ability to manage your sort of object collections alongside your kind of special collections, manuscripts and archival materials, finding aids and things like that. I just want to mention that we right now have a federal grant proposal into the NHPRC, which is a component of the National Archives, to further improve our public portal and in particular its ability to display and export DACS compliant EAD finding aids. And as a part of this grant proposal, we'll be hooking directly into Connecticut Archives Online, which is a system out at Western that really aggregates finding aids from collections around Connecticut. So it's another sort of searchable portal for finding archival collections. The idea here being to really increase the discoverability of especially smaller archival collections sort of scattered around the state. And as a part of that grant proposal, we're also going to be hopefully working with the traveling archivist to provide not only training, but actual manpower support to participating organizations who elect to be involved in this grant project to actually make those finding aids, because we know that it's often not just the training, but the time that you need and the help of a person to do the work. So we don't know if that's going to be funded yet, but this is the sort of thing that we're constantly doing to improve things for our users. Is there anything else you wanted to say about the public portal, Diane, here? Hearing nothing, I will proceed. We also, as we mentioned earlier, is sort of the third component of the system, your collections management system, the public portal, if you choose to make items public. We also have, through the generosity of Connecticut Humanities, created a software connector with the Connecticut Digital Archive. And many of you are probably familiar with the CTDA as really as Connecticut's hub for the Digital Public Library of America, the DPLA. This means that materials that are in the CTDA automatically get sort of sucked up into the DPLA. It really makes materials more findable because people can go to this central kind of like national digital collections database and find stuff from all over. So what we've done with these funds from Connecticut Humanities is built a software connector between Connecticut Collections and the CTDA. And this does two things, really. It offers permanent digital preservation, because this is really what the CTDA does, is digital preservation for all of your materials that you have in your Connecticut Collections system, whether they're public or not. In addition, it also makes publicly designated items visible on the CTDA. So that also means they'll be discoverable in the DPLA. So we're in the final stages of building out this connector, but the idea here is that we didn't want people to have to join Connecticut Collections and then also put their stuff in the CTDA as sort of a second thing. All of this stuff, if you make it public, it gets, you can search for it in the CTDA as well as through the Connecticut Collections public portal, and you get digital preservation for everything, regardless of its public status. Another advantage I really think of Connecticut Collections is that we're a central part of a growing statewide network for digital cultural heritage in Connecticut. We're a part of the Connecticut Collections Alliance, which brings together a number of partners across the state to talk about digital strategy and to coordinate how to do things best in the state. And the idea here, and Connecticut Humanities funding has really been central to this, as well as funding from the State Office of the Arts, DECD. Initiatives to really grow the digital infrastructure around the state of Connecticut and make it easier for organizations to digitize their collections, to get their materials up and publicly accessible if that's what they want, to help them organize their collections. And we're hopeful with some increased funding that we expect Connecticut Humanities to be getting in the next couple of years, that there's going to be a lot of investment in building out this digital infrastructure as well. And Connecticut Collections is going to be a big part of that. So what does it cost? There are essentially two components to the cost structure for Connecticut Collections. The main one is an annual fee. You can think of this as sort of a software subscription. And like CLHO memberships themselves, this is assessed on a sliding scale based on your organization's annual budget. It covers essentially, it helps us pay for the cost of running our server and support and maintenance from our software partners at Whirligig who make collective access. So this comes with, that technical support and the training resources and availability that Diane's position provides as well. If you are interested in moving your data from another system or another, even a spreadsheet, there may also be a one-time migration fee when you move into the system. So this is something that you would not be assessed annually. It only happens right at the very beginning when you're pulling your data into the system. And how much that costs really depends on the shape that your data is in and how complex the migration is for the folks at Whirligig to do. So it's really their time, paying for their time. And this is not, something where CLHO takes a cut. We just pass this straight through to the folks who do the migration for us. And Diane works closely with folks in helping prepare their data for migration when they have data to migrate, to help minimize the complexity of the migration and lower those migration costs. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what you do in that respect, Diane.
Basically, it all comes down to how much time the tech folks have to spend on figuring out what information goes to what fields, how that information is formatted within that field, if they need to do anything to help fix it. One of the things that I did, Fairfield was part of the pilot group back in 2016. And we went through all of our exported FileMaker data and just cleaned it up as much as possible, and talked to the tech folks to know that, okay, if you have a person's name, it's split out into like first, middle, last. And the system's capable of kind of doing a self-split and trying to guess where it's going to go. But in order to make it easier on them figuring that out and to make the cleanup a little bit easier on us, we kind of manipulated our data beforehand to make that easier. And we created our column had one thing. We were similar to Nick, and we had Miss Bessie Smith, actually with Miss Bessie Jennings, but it had the Miss and the Bessie and the Jennings. So we, rather than leaving that in the one field, we created a first name column, a middle name column, a last name column, and went through and did a lot of that so we could make it a little bit easier and more straightforward. We do actually have kind of a Excel guide sheet into what kinds of columns and column names are in our collective access system so that you can go through and kind of sort out the data ahead of time. This is something we're hoping to give a little bit more help to institutions this year. So we're not just saying like, no, just fix it. And you guys don't know what you're fixing it to. So we're hoping to have a little bit more help with that. That being said, we're not expecting your records to be perfect. Nobody's records are perfect. There's a lot of things that are actually easier to clean up in the new system versus what you're in now. And anybody who's looking at a migration, we can talk about that and kind of see what you guys are looking at. But anything that we can do ahead of time to kind of reduce the work and the guessing and the going through on the Whirligig end just helps bring that cost down, because it's just their solid hourly rate, their solid hourly work that we're paying for, or that you're paying for the migration part.
Okay. Thanks, Diane. Just here's a little bit more about the annual fee structure. You can also find this information on our website. And I put together just a quick little cost comparison with Past Perfect, which is a program that many are familiar with, especially in its desktop version. Past Perfect now offers a kind of online version of itself that is similar in many respects to Connecticut Collections. But I did a quick cost comparison of this. One of the things you can see here, they also have sort of a sliding scale, but the upper bound and the lower bound really is much more expensive than Connecticut Collections in terms of the annual cost you might be expected to pay. Public access, I also noted, is extra for Past Perfect Online, and you wouldn't be a part of a searchable portal for other Connecticut institutions. You would just have a searchable version of your own database. And Connecticut Collections also we don't have any hidden fees for like adding additional users to your database or limiting you in the number of records. I think Past Perfect's base version for the online version is 1 user and 5,000 records. And I'm sure that most of you have probably more than 5,000 records in your systems right now. So if you want to kick the tires, Diane can tell you how to do that.
So we have a lovely little sandbox for everyone to go play in. If it's hard to describe a whole system and figure out if it's something you might be interested in without really looking at it and seeing kind of how it works, how intuitive it could be or may not be for you. So we do have our sandbox. This is the URL at the top, sandbox.ctcollections.org. The username is just administrator and the password is Bristol1. And you're going in at a higher level of ability and security in this. So you can pretty much do anything with it you want. All the data that's in there is based on real data, but it's basically faux at this point. I did take a big chunk of Fairfield's pre-cleaned up data and added it to this. So you can really see how it kind of treats migrations, what's there, go through and just, you can add things, delete things, however you want to do it, feel free. There's a few, there's more object records in there than collections records, but there are quite a few collections records in there based on their finding aids. And lots of other people have added just random things in there over the years as they've tried it just to, kick the tires, like Amber said. So feel free. Go in there, play with it, see what you think. If you have any problems getting in there, let me know. And just play around, have fun.
So if this sounds good to you, we're taking applications right now, and applications for the next cohort are due on September 17th. What you do is you fill out a Google form. This is the first page of it here. That really walks you through kind of some questions about the nature of your collections, the extent of your collections, what you're using now for the system, what your thinking is and needs are around a collections management system that helps us work with you better and think about, whether Connecticut Collections might be a good fit for you. I'll just say, if you're interested, you should feel free to fill out the application. There's no obligation to join if you apply. It's primarily exploratory. Although we do hope that, if you apply, you're serious about it. And if you have any further questions, Diane is really the person to email. Her email address is ctco@clho.org, and she can really offer some wonderful guidance. She knows the system in and out. She knows it from a user perspective as well, and as a collections manager, as well as someone who kind of works in the back end. So she is available to answer your questions.
And like Amber said, definitely feel free to fill it out, even if you're using it. It's a really good exercise for your institution to kind of think your way through what's involved in all this. So there are some like longer essay questions to answer and that kind of thing. It's a really good exercise for you guys to think through. And if you hit something that you're like, oh, we didn't really think of that, I don't know that we're there yet, or it brings up questions for you, that's really good. It's just a really good general exercise for you to go through.
So like I said, you can visit our website, clho.org/ctcollections for more information. There's a long page that has information about the pricing structure. There's a link on the side to the application, which is like a complex Google Forms link. And as always, you can email us at connecticutcollections@clho.org for more information. And now I am happy to close this out and open things up to a more general Q&A. So,
And ask questions about whatever you want. Broad, narrow, detailed, doesn't matter. Go ahead, Terrence, you can just shout it out.
Good morning. First of all, that was a very nice presentation, very succinct, and I understood, I think, everything that was there. I'm from Middlebury Historical Society, and I don't see anybody else from my organization on. So I believe that you're going to make the recording available for this meeting. I think that the other members really need to see it. I don't think they need to interact. I think you've explained everything very well. And I think our transition, we'll have to clean up our data first before we, bring it in. But I think we're very interested in something like this. But I'm only speaking as the treasurer, all right? I only get one vote in there, but it sure looks good to me.
great, thanks. And yes, you can, if you go to the CLHO website, there are like some little social media buttons up at the very top. If you click on the YouTube icon, that'll take you right to our YouTube channel. And as soon as this is downloaded and then uploaded, which is sometimes a slow process, it'll be available there. So that's where you can go to find it.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Amorous?
Yes, who is talking?
Hang on, I'll put my video on.
Hi, Terry.
Yeah, Terry Wilson. I'm with the Avon Historical Society, and there's several of our members on this.
Great.
Quick question for you. In general, about how many people for a small organization of volunteers like us would this take to do? Would you like it to be one person that really does it, or do you think a team? Kind of what's been the other smaller groups' experience?
I'm going to pop this to Diane.
Okay.
We've had both in a way. There's usually one, maybe two main contacts that I'll have. So I'm, we're kind of filtering through me and that other person to get the information back and forth. So to make sure everybody gets the same information. But I do have, as far as the whole process of it, one of our members from last year, Westpac, so the Westport Public Art Consortium. Collections. Yeah. They have a whole team of people working on it. They are like uber organized. So within their organization, they have a whole team of people that were working on the whole migration and working on the collection and that kind of thing. So for like the actual process of it, one or two people's perfect. Within your group, if you have like a whole team of people that you want to put together to work on this, that's fantastic.
And should you have a dedicated laptop for this kind of thing so that it doesn't commingle with anybody else's things should they have to drop out?
Nope, you don't have to, because it's just all going through a web browser. So it's going through a URL. Every institution has the control over the logins. So the users on there, you guys add your own users and add the level of users. So there's levels of security. So you'll have system administrators, you'll have catalogers, you'll have a level that's research only. So, you can create those and control those yourself. So if you have somebody on your team that is dropping out, that doesn't want to be there anymore, you just take their login off. So you guys control it on your end to do that.
Great, thank you.
I will say right now I have an intern working on a project for me that is at the cataloger level. So they can't delete anything. They can only like edit information. And I'm the administrator for us. So I, get a username and a password and hand it out. We have an intern login that they can access from anywhere. And the nice thing is I can keep track of changes. So if somebody screws up and, makes a change that we didn't want, I can go back and see exactly who did that. So, it's just a way to double check people's work, but it's really helpful when, there's myself, and then I have two other sort of main collections volunteers, and then I have various interns and other staff members that need to access the collection. So it makes it very easy to kind of see who's doing what, who's adding what images, who's accessing it when. So it's a very helpful control to sort of, as Diane said, if you want an intern not to completely reformat your database, you can give them only the access to like add pictures and nothing else. So it's very helpful.
Amorous?
Yes, Ron, go ahead.
Yeah, howdy. I've been involved with a couple of history museums, but I'm in the process of installing a new museum called MOCI, Museum of Connecticut Cartoonists and Illustrators. It's going to be in the Barker Gallery at Foxwoods. And do you have any special help for fledgling museums?
Sorry, I'm just writing down the name of that museum just so I can keep tabs on it, because that sounds really fascinating. Help in starting off with managing their collections, or what sort of help are you thinking?
Anything.
I mean, yeah. Well, CLHO provides a lot of, this is one of the things that we do is, sort of support and professional development with a focus on smaller and emerging institutions. So if, forgive me for not knowing whether you're a CLHO member or not, but institutional memberships in CLHO are a really good deal and give you discounts to our programs. If you want to get a sense, if you haven't been participating with the work that we've been doing so far, we've been virtual for the past year and change, and all of our free programs are up on our YouTube channel, so you can check those out. There's resources around fundraising, doing virtual programs, conversations about reopening in the midst of COVID and things like that. And this is one of the things that is really CLHO's mission, is to support especially the smaller institutions around the state of Connecticut. So the League really does a lot of that work. And if you want to send me an email, I'd be happy to talk with you more about how we might be able to help you and the Museum of Connecticut Cartoonists and Illustrators get going there. In terms of managing your collection, we offer, and Diane, is the one who really does a lot of this work for incoming users of Connecticut Collections. We offer training. We have a training manual that Diane basically wrote. And all of that information is up on our website. And she also works with organizations as they're, if they're migrating data, finishing things up and getting started working in the system, or if they're starting from a whole new system, giving them support in how to get started in that. In the pre-COVID days, she was just, going around doing site visits to folks, and, when they had problems, answering their questions that way. Zoom, we do a lot of Zoom trainings now, and Diane can talk a little bit more if you want about the support that she provides in that realm. One of the things we're hoping to do, again, none of this is set in stone, but with some of the increased funding we're hoping to see around digital infrastructure, we're hoping to hire some more support for Connecticut Collections. So an additional Diane to help out organizations and users with the system, and to assist with a lot of that hands-on work. So I think that we do try to provide as much support as our human resources are capable of providing to our member institutions, both at the League and for Connecticut Collections.
I don't think I'm a member. I actually applied to be the director at one point.
Okay.
You're located in Hamden, right?
We used to be. We're based out of CCSU now in New Britain.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll email you and we'll talk.
Please do. It's director@clho.org. I'd love to talk to you more, Ron.
Okay, thank you.
As far as help, from what Amara said before, with you don't have to go with emailing somebody far away. I'm here. And you're not going to get steered towards videos and things like that. I will say, one of the first things I will say is, did you read the manual? And we have a video for that. So that's kind of like a light fib. You won't be directed towards the video. I will directly, put you towards the manual or video if I feel it's going to be more useful to you. One thing we're also trying to encourage and we're still building this aspect of it as we get more and more people, is to have our users talk to each other. Especially groups that have very similar collections and that can help each other, especially people with a lot of professional staff versus all volunteer organizations, people that are geographically close and types of collections close. We're continuing to try to encourage interaction between everybody. So it's maybe not just me, but if you're in Weston, you can call Nick over in Wilton and be like, hey, you guys are close. What do you have? And, kind of have a conversation that way as well.
Well, I used to teach at Cheshire Academy. I think I'll just walk over and see what they can show me.
Perfect.
Great. Leslie and then Darren.
Hi. So I have a financial question. I work for a small organization where the budget's always tight. I would love to get into this program, but I'm wondering, maybe it's too early to answer this, but what your best guess is with increased funding to support digitization of collections, hopefully coming down the road. Any guess on, I'm thinking, should I be thinking maybe next year we could apply with some and hope for some, support that way, or if it's years down the pike, maybe try and find alternative ways to cover the costs. But I'm just wondering if there's any information available in the hopeful realm as far as that goes.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, Leslie. And we know what things are like, and especially in the past couple of years, budgets have been super tight. So this is an area where we've really been trying to work to especially address that upfront migration cost, which can really be very daunting to organizations who have data to bring into the system, who don't want to start from scratch, who've done a good job, whether it's, in Past Perfect or just a bunch of Excel spreadsheets. But, they get that $1,000 plus, quote, and it's like, no, we can't do this. So one of the things we've been trying to do is be more transparent about what those costs look like up front. So if you're thinking about coming into the system, you can do some of the work that you may need to do on your end to think about, maybe we can apply to the local community foundation for a grant to, help us get on board. And, those are funds that could, cover that. Connecticut Humanities, I think, is also thinking, we've expressed to them, the fact that this has been a barrier for many of our members. And so I think they're thinking about ways in which their grant lines might be able to assist people in, moving into Connecticut Collections and help defray those costs. And the NHPRC grant that we've applied for, which we'll find out about it in the fall, hopefully. One of the line items in that budget is to request funds to reduce to a migration stipend for organizations who want to migrate, but who may not, have, like $4,000 just lying around to do it. So we're actively looking into this, and I'm hoping, I'm going to do everything I can to help on the migration, and especially to really kind of get rid of that, reduce that as much as possible for folks.
So would your advice be to go ahead and fill out the application for the September deadline and then assess later?
Yes.
Once we can find out the cost.
Yeah, I would, if you're really interested, I would go ahead and fill out the application. As Diane said, I think it's a good self-assessment exercise. It asks some really good questions about your collection and the directions you want to go with it. And it helps us know that you're interested. And we maintain a list of sort of prospective Connecticut Collections members, and we try to touch base with them, annually. So if you apply and, like I said, there's no commitment, it turns out, you just don't have, the migration is expensive and you can't do it this year, we'll follow up with you. And we'll check in every year. Tracy has asked how often we open this up. We bring in, the application is always due in mid-September. And we bring in cohorts sort of all together on an annual basis. So there's always an opportunity coming up in the year ahead. So I would encourage you to apply, Leslie.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Darren, go ahead.
And you're on mute, Darren.
I'm still on mute. You would think after all this time I would figure this out.
Same.
I've been working with the city of Norwalk, who have a very interesting situation insofar as they have two different Past Perfect subscriptions to handle, one the city collection and one the Historical Society collection, and then there's a few other collections within there. I've spoken to Diane about it to a certain degree, but what the city of Norwalk is hoping to do is first get onto Connecticut Collections for their collections management. And as a part of that, they do not want to migrate any of the information that's already on Past Perfect because it has a number of faults with it, and it just very often can't be trusted. So I've already actually filled out your whole application, and I'm hoping to submit it in the next day or so. But there's a whole section talking about the current system, and a lot of those questions I can't really answer because the system is so problematic as it is right now. How would you suggest that I go about answering them? Should I just write not applicable? Should I just do the best I can saying this is what's going on. Should I explain the current, I mean, I can explain the current situation in the first series of background questions. I just want to make sure that I'm giving all the information I possibly can, because this is something they definitely want to try to have happen sooner rather than later.
I mean, I'm assuming, I'll let Diane really field this one, but I'm assuming that if you're not planning on migrating that data as a part of like in a software way, if you're planning on, basically starting from scratch and inputting, using that as a resource for putting in clean data, I don't think we're as concerned about the system that you're on.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yep,
All right.
exactly what Amber said. It's totally fine. I've seen systems that started fresh, groups that started fresh because their old data, they felt their old data was a little sketchy and it was going to cause more problems. And then years later, after being familiar with the new system and looking at the old data, oh my God, that was the best decision they ever made, because like everything was in the old system, but the data was so screwy, it wouldn't have been worth it, and it would have messed them up more than to just start fresh. So
yeah, and that's a situation wherein people have cataloged things incorrectly, put wrong photographs with different objects. They have a really bad accession number issue at the moment, where people were cataloging with 2-digit years, which needs to be fixed, because in our files it says one thing and in the database it says a different thing. So just starting with clean data is, I think, the way to go for this particular changeover.
And it's cheaper.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's always a good thing too, right? It just means a lot more work for me, which is fine. Then the other question I have is there a cap on how many people you accept into this program in a given year? Or is it just we see how many people apply and go from there?
We haven't had a cap in the past. Applications have been, I think we had an extraordinary year where Diane did yeoman's work in bringing in more than we, really had the manpower for. We've been pretty steady at a handful of organizations every year. And that's sort of a level we feel comfortable with right now. Demand has been pretty steady, although we are anticipating, especially because of the changes that COVID, I think, has brought to a lot of organizations and wanting to, do more digital stuff, more public facing things, that we do expect more demand. And we're hoping, in the next year to be hiring additional support for Connecticut Collections. So I think, right now, we're sort of chugging along, and we don't have a cap. Like, there's no official cap. We try and bring in everybody we can. And, sometimes 2 migrations are really complicated, and they can be like bringing in 5 people at once, and sometimes 5 are really easy because, if you're just getting started, here's the system, here's how you use it, go. Then we could do a lot of those, right?
Right.
So.
Okay, and then how quickly after that September 17th date do you let people know whether or not it's going to move forward?
Diane, do you want to talk about that?
We basically there's no set notification date. Once you apply, we'll have a conversation with you. And we also definitely have to speak to our tech guys and, get a place in line in their workflow to see when it's going through. We have the mid-September line, and we had a whole timeline figured out last year. And then I don't think anybody got up and running until COVID obviously messed things up, but we didn't have people up and running for a couple months into the new year. So it really depends on, we'll have a conversation, it'll be ongoing to say we think you guys are really good candidates and these are your next steps that we have to take. And then we kind of go from there. So there's not a, notification date necessarily.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
We look forward to your application, Darren. I know we have 3 more questions here, and I'm hoping that you can stick around for them. I'd like to field them. So it's going to be Marianne, Barbara, and Elizabeth in that order. Marianne, go ahead. Please unmute yourself so we can hear your wonderful question.
Okay. We currently use Past Perfect. And I find it hard to train people because we have volunteers. And I'm wondering if, let's see my notes, what the level of difficulty is between the two systems.
Diane, do you want to speak to that?
I can start and then I can kick it over to Nick too, because of his lovely little instructions that he has for some of his volunteers. I've not worked with Past Perfect on an ongoing basis. I've popped in and out of like the sample versions of it just so I can help some of our members figure out how to migrate and that kind of thing. It doesn't seem all that straightforward and seems a little complex and confusing in parts. Especially where you do kind of need to set it up in a particular way for your institution and get it working, which I'm sure if someone has the time and the ability to do that, it works great. I feel like it is kind of clunky and kind of all over the place. I've also, in the past, I have worked with the museum system with TMS, which is, like I said before, super Cadillac version. And I remember starting with that and was like, oh my gosh, I don't understand this. This is all over the place. With that experience under my belt a little bit, honestly, this I found really, really straightforward. There's very clearly named sections within the records and very clearly, I think, clearly named fields within the sections too. So I found it, learning it, like nobody taught me how to do it. We were like, oh, okay, now we're migrating to this new system, like here, have fun. I just started working my way through it and found it pretty easy going as far as learning it. And that was without anybody teaching it to me. So I can talk to Nick, who's had more volunteers working with it and what his experience was with them.
Okay, and thank you. Then what I'm finding is the difficulty is not in the cataloging, but in reports. And, people, it's hard to do a search in Past Perfect. So that's kind of what I was looking at, but I'll go into the practice screen. And the second question I had was, can you use a Mac or a PC interchangeably? Because what I'm looking for is being able to leave the cataloging computers in the office, but have the docents be able to search when somebody comes in and says, gee, do you have any things from my family? Docents need to be able to look at the catalog, and currently we can't do that. So would we?
I'll answer two things for that. For the reporting and that kind of thing, you can customize any kind of search and any kind of report you want. Definitely go into the sandbox and kind of look at that. It's there's a lot of stuff that's much more useful if you're doing a training or something to like go through, and I can show people how to do it, and that's involved in some of our beginning training. But it's much more, I find it much easier than a lot of other systems that I use to be able to customize things and search for different things. And that's also the thing, and one of the other systems I've used to get a really good custom report, you had to go back to the company and have them do it for you. Otherwise, you had to have super complex server training. This, you don't need that. It's all front end stuff. So it's pretty straightforward, which is great. And also exports into a number of different formats. So you can export into an Excel sheet, you can export into a Word document, you can export it as a PDF, all of those kind of things. For the other part of the computer, Mac, Chromebook, PC, doesn't matter, you're using a web browser. And like Nick had mentioned before, he was showing stuff to people on his phone. I go on my phone and look stuff up and show people all the time. You don't have to have particular equipment in particular places. It's just anything with a web browser and a Wi-Fi connection, internet connection.
We use an iPad, which is great because you can take photos with the iPad and upload it right to your system. So it's great, especially when you're walking around the museum. Just have your iPad out and snap it. And as long as it has a web browser, you're good to go.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne. I want to get to Barbara and Elizabeth's question before we close out. So Barbara, you're next. Please unmute yourself. There you go.
Yes, hi, I think I have. I'm Barbara Hagen-Smith from the Amity Woodbridge Historical Society, and I have just a very simple couple of questions here. Is there any component in this system to attach membership history or financial donation history to the donors?
Diane and Nick, you would be more familiar with that than me.
Not in the way that you're thinking, no. This does not have like a membership donor capacity. As far as like object donations, yes, it links to that kind of thing. There's several places for notes within a person's like record, but not in the way that like Past Perfect does have that useful component of membership and that kind of thing. This does not have that. That's the one good thing I'd say about keeping Past Perfect is that has that capacity to do that. Although again, I've never used it, so I don't know how well it works. But this does not have that capacity. It also currently does not generate. I know Past Perfect generates letters, so it can generate like a deed and generate other things. This does not. Currently looking at one of our compatriots out in Minnesota who has a very similar project to ours. She's doing something with it and creating a separate document, and I need to talk to her more about how to do that, but we don't currently have that.
The capabilities there, it's not set up, essentially, I think.
For the letters.
For the donor letter, yeah. For managing your membership, this is for managing your collection, not for managing your membership lists. So, that is, I think, the way to think about it. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Nick, in terms of thinking about object donors and what the system can do around that.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the things the database has is what's called entities. Essentially, it's sort of person, places, and things that it has a note section, but it doesn't really have so you could say, oh, this person gave us $500 to care for the collection, but it's not going to track like financial gifts in the way that, like the museum system, I believe, does. It's purely for collection management.
Okay, thank you. That was one of the things that I did like about Past Perfect, was this total connection throughout the museum.
And we are not looking at adding that at this point. So it's not likely that we will ever add that component. I don't think that Collective Access has that. And I don't think that we'd be pushing to get that either down the road.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Barbara. Great question. Elizabeth, go ahead.
Okay, let me just, there we go. I had a few questions. You mentioned, of course, it's cloud-based and so forth. Where is the server that holds this data and who is managing it? And are they going to be around in 5 years?
Great question. So we have a couple of things on that end. So the server is managed by a company called iWeb, which is based in Montreal. And that's where the server runs. They have, all of the standard kind of, like maintenance and, backup and sort of type things that you would expect. We have some backups of the system that Whirligig does for us, but one of the things that we're looking to do within the next year is do a complete server backup in-house on hardware that CLHO is going to purchase as well. So we have some additional redundancy. We're also looking into additional cloud backup through iWeb. So we are, that's an area where we have, basic backup right now and are looking to improve that. Okay. We recommend that organizations periodically back up their own databases because the data really is yours. It's not CLHO's. And we try and do that, for our users in case of some disaster. That's a best practice that we really recommend our users to do, is to periodically make backups of their own system. It's easy to export. The data is yours. It belongs to you. That's one of the ways that we think about that, but that's an excellent question.
Okay, and then the last thing is you mentioned getting NHPRC money, expanding, sounds like the sort of features surrounding archival collections and manuscripts.
That's right.
What do you think are the lacks right now in the system? And what are you hoping to see? Could you just reiterate where are you headed with that? And what are the problems right now?
I wouldn't say that there are problems. What we can't do is automatically generate, sort of output of finding aid. We can?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, so what are we doing now?
Within the system, the archives and everything are fine. Like if you're using it within your building, not within your building, but when you're using it within your collection, that part's fine. We don't have any issues with that. There's a couple tweaks that we want to make on reports, but you can still do things like that. We are not publishing any of the archives and
That's it.
collections to the public
It's the
portal
public
yet.
portal.
That does not have that capability, and that's one of the things we're really trying to do with the grant. So along with publishing it to the portal, we actually also want to be able to send it to Connecticut Archives Online as well to be part of that collection. So within your collection and your own system, it's totally fine. It's just, it's not available to the public at this point.
Okay, and very quickly, finally, a few years ago, some people were saying that there wasn't the option to really describe things, you know, in terms of subject headings, so forth, on a deep level, you know, in collective access, that you couldn't, that things were up here instead of going way down. So you use more granular descriptions plus local headings. Is that?
Oh,
is that
okay.
true?
I know what your question is. Okay. I totally understand your question, because Meg actually asked me that yesterday or the other day when she picked up something from me in Fairfield. So there is quite a few fields and quite a few options for being able to really granularly describe something. As far as general descriptions for subject headings and those kind of things, we have direct links to places like the Library of Congress subject headings, Getty Art and Architecture Thesaurus, a bunch of those like bigger name, well-known, popularly used things. Local subject headings, yes, you can do it. It's a little fussy to be able to go in and figure out like how you want to control it, how you want to do it. We currently, when we migrate data in from another system, there's one field on our subjects page that is called legacy nomenclature. So that's for any institutions who have added their own local headings, their own tags, any of the things like that that are for them locally to track things. That gets imported into that field. That field is currently not accessible to the public, even within those records, because everybody had such wide, varied things. And many of them were not, including Fairfield, I will say kind of especially Fairfield, we had weird tags. They're not anything that was standardized within the old system, like Library of Congress is, like Getty is. We still kept them so we could go back and see them. But it is not public, and because of the weirdness between everybody, they're not public. You can go in and kind of create your own hierarchy that links into that field, and you can do that. Like I said, it's a little time consuming and clunky to do, but you 100% could do it.
And I want to add to this, and maybe Diana, you can jog my memory. I seem to remember a meeting where we were talking about, I don't know if it was a CHI meeting or a CCA meeting, but we were talking about, wouldn't it be good if there were a Connecticut-wide kind of local entity list managed by the state library or something else that we could plug into Connecticut Collections and have that kind of those local that local nomenclature as a controlled vocabulary that could be linked into Connecticut Collections. This isn't something that exists, but it's something that we've talked about, you know, which is, I think, one of the advantages of being plugged into this statewide system where people are having these conversations about collections and best practices. Because if that's something that's on your wish list and you join the system, like, you know, we bring that to the table, or like, our users want this, how can we make this happen? You know, here in the state of Connecticut. So, you know, I can't make any promises about that, but that's not, you know, your question is something that other people are thinking about, which suggests to me that that might be a need we would want to think about in the future.
We were talking to Novamuse, because they're doing it up in a couple of the groups in Canada are doing something like that.
Okay.
So they were like, yeah, we're doing this. And we're like, wait, what? You can do that? And that is definitely something that's been talked about, especially like people's names for 15, 20 years, of having some kind of wish list of like, I can put in my subject heading for, you know, John Smith down the street, but then you're putting John Smith in, and we might be a little bit different. So they're not necessarily going to, like, where do we get that all coming together? So
Yeah.
People have brought it up recently. So it's an ongoing wish for everybody.
We have one last, have we answered all your questions, Elizabeth? Excellent. It looks like Terrence has one more question. Go ahead, Terrence.
gotta hold it down. I'll make it quick. So regarding migration, is there a middle ground between either entering in from scratch or paying to have it done? And what I mean by that is there a software tool that if you believe that your organization had some sort of regular data, that you could maybe roll your own or use a tool to import or migrate at least some of it without having to pay for it.
There is a feature in the system that it's like an import data. That's where the tech people come in, is there has to be a crosswalk to make sure that the fields that you have are being sent to the fields that exist. That's a little bit beyond my level of techiness. But I do know, for instance, that, once there is a basic crosswalk done, if you uploaded a chunk of information last year and this year you found more information that's in that same format, you could totally use that again and do it yourself. It's the initial crosswalk and matching up the fields that really we need the techie people for. Because for instance, the way that I got all the data, all the Fairfield data into the sandbox is I used our old migration setup from Fairfield, put it into the sandbox, and then did a import into that. So there is just that initial figuring out of how the fields all match up. And that could definitely be a conversation with the tech folks to say, like, do you have a simple, straightforward, what would we have to do?
Okay, thank you.
I'm muted. We are about 15 minutes over time, but we still have about 40 people here. Thank you so much for sticking with us. I hope this has been a valuable experience and that you've learned something. If you have any follow-up questions, I really recommend that you reach out to us. Diane's email is ctco@clho.org. And as you can see from today, she knows the system inside and out, and is really happy to don't sell yourself short, Diane. She's really happy to answer your questions and talk with you and think through things with you a little bit as well. And the rest of us at the League are happy to do that as well. So we encourage you to apply if you're interested. Please reach out to us if you have any other questions. Check out the sandbox, play around, see what it's like. That's really the best way to understand if this is a system that might be right for you, is to actually get in, dive in, see what it looks like, play around. And we hope to hear from many of you this year and in the years ahead. Thank you so much for being here, and have a wonderful afternoon.